Okay, so the next step in building this API is going to be to add another section, if you will, or association for adding measures. I mean, we're going to be adding measures. So what we'll do, we need to create another route that will support measures, and then we need to create another measures controller. So to begin building the route, we build a route for Web API in our Web API config. We already have our route for our food, so we're going to build a new one for our measures. I just put a singular here just to see that we can differentiate this between controller names. So the name and the controller name here doesn't have to be the same. So we name our route measure, and our route template now is going to be, the first part is going to be the same, still foods, but we're going to be getting the measures for the foods. So the next one right here is measures, controller name, and then our ID of the measure itself. With this, obviously, if we don't have the food ID here, we won't be able to retrieve the measures because we need food ID for the measures. So we can't have this optional. So this is going to be not optional, but our ID in the end is still optional. So if we're passing the ID, we're going to get one particular measure, and if you're just sending measures, it's going to give us all of them for the particular food ID. So food ID is critical here for sure. And then our controller name is going to be, we're going to create a new one, measures. So here's our measures controller that I just created. It has to inherit from API controller. And the first thing that we need to do here is we need to set up our constructor to be able to get our interface and also our factory, model factory. So I went ahead and created a controller and passed in our repository through our dependency injection, and then went ahead and new it up our model factory here. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go and create our first get method here, and this is going to be a public enumerable, or no, let's call it, enumerable of measure model, and we said we need two parameters here, integer food ID and integer ID for this to work. Oh, get. So in here we simply say var results equals to the name that we're going to get measures for food and food ID. This is not going to work because we need to create our model here. So we do first to list, or otherwise it's going to query the database server directly instead of our list, and then we do select. So we want our measure model So we call our model factory here, create, and we pass in the measure model. And this error right here that I got earlier during my practice too is when I go to the factory here in models, model factory, you see, because I have one of these methods private, it's trying to look up this one with this method overloading. Now they both have the same name but have a different signature. This one is a measure model, so that will fix our issue here. So basically here now we are returning results, and we are selecting from these results our measure model, through our factory. In fact, in order to avoid some confusion, since I'm still kind of new to the link here, is I would like to break my queries into two. So I like this way. I like to use iQueryable of the type that we are querying first, and get that into variable query, so that I have understanding for now that I'm getting a measure here. So query is the measure, and then our result is going to be of type measure model, and we are sending the measure through this select, through our through a lambda expression here. We are sending in our measure class into our model factory here, which takes in the measure but returns the measure model. So our result automatically is the measure model, and we're returning it here. So then another one that we need to create here is for only one measure model. So we just call this one measure model, get integer food ID, integer ID, so for this one right here, what we need to do is we need to call the get measure. So I'll also do iQueryable of measure, call it a query here as well, and I'll do query repo.get measure, and here we're passing the ID of the measure, not the food ID, obviously. ID of the measure. So we don't need iQueryable here because it's only one item. It's not a list of measures. So up here, actually, for this get, we only need the food ID. We don't really have the ID for the actual model, of the measure model. So food ID here to get our list of measures, and here both. And then down here, like I said, I like to do the query first, and then that worked out pretty well here because we wanted to check from the return here, we wanted to check that food ID matches this food ID before we return it, and we send in the measure query. Otherwise we return null. So to test what we got really quick, we'll go to our API /nutrition/food first. API nutrition slash foods. Now we can get individual food, for example 1. For this individual food we can only get its measures. And then for these measures we can also get individual measures. So basically that's how we did this association thing. And now what we're going to discuss next, I suppose, is instead of using for user to know, we don't really know what's one, what to query here, 1, 2, 3. So somehow to know how to call the appropriate route in order to get what we want.